And we are live. Hello there, everybody. This is Mr. Geocon with another one of my quick takes, which, haven't been very quick. I see that we don't really have anybody here yet. That's all right. We can just wait a little bit while I just kind of ramble on. Once we get like a couple of people here, I can just start. I'm going to be doing a lot of. Oh, we've got 3 people. That's excellent. I'm glad you're here. I'll be keeping you company for a little bit, for about half an hour, I suppose. I don't plan on this live stream being as long as last quick take, quick take, quote unquote. Anyways. Before we start, I'd like to talk about my plans for the channel going forward. I have at least 3 videos in the works right now, 3 edited videos in the works right now that I plan on finishing by the end of 2020. One is a video that is a critique of the anti-SJWs, entitled the Eternal Bellyachers. Another one is a video on Gendergate that I've been working on for quite some time, and I'm still in the planning stages of that. Because Gendergate is for those of you who don't know, is a little fuss that's been occurring within academia concerning the transgender stuff, and whether we should define woman as adult human female or not. And then finally I have another video about secularism. It'll be my take on the new atheist phenomenon and the irreligion phenomenon in general. Although, to be honest, I don't think I'll be able to top the distributists' hour-long video on new atheism that he just came out with today, with my secularism video. Although, my analysis is very different from distributists, though it doesn't really cut against his analysis. I think in a lot of ways our views are complementary. But essentially what I wanted to say with my secularism video is that the sort of distinctions that modern human beings make between secularism and religion, they're not as clear-cut as one might expect, given the prominence of these words. If you're a fan of Dave the Distributist, you might say that religion and secularism are both related magical words, and as such, they have very loose definitions, but very concise political consequences for their enforcement. And this dynamic has been around for centuries now. So those are the 3 videos that I have planned for the rest of 2020. At least those 3 edited videos. I don't have any interviews lined up for my geoconservative files, but I do plan on talking to the Prudentialist and Morgoth's Review. I'm hoping to get one or two of those 2 or both of them on my channel sometime for interviews, because they are very interesting people, and I always like talking to different dissident voices on the internet, because I like hearing what they have to say. I feel like I'm blessed to have all these big named YouTubers, and even tiny named YouTubers, who are very knowledgeable people, very creative people, who take politics seriously. They don't try and make a joke out of it. They don't try to put all this irony bro humor into it. They're very serious about politics. They are very they're very intellectual about politics, and even where we disagree, I can understand where they're coming from, and that warms my heart more than anything. Now, I guess we're not. Now that I've said my piece, I think it's time that we get to the meat of this topic, and that is a very distinct intellectual mistake that I've been seeing within a lot of internet circles, and especially on social media, but it's all over the place. And once you see this intellectual mistake and realize what's wrong with it, you can't unsee it. It's just everywhere, and that is what I call sign mania. Now, I didn't get this. I didn't get this name out of nowhere. It comes from an essay written by a guy named James Franklin called "The Renaissance Myth." Now, James Franklin, I'll share his bio here. All right, this is James Franklin. He is an Australian mathematics professor, and he's quite the well-researched guy. Very, very smart, very credentialed, and he's an Aristotelian philosopher who wrote an entire book called The Aristotelian Realist Philosophy of Mathematics, which is quite the find. You should really pick that up. I think it's a pretty good book if you're into those kinds of dry metaphysical debates. But he wrote a much more interesting essay, much more pertinent to this topic, called The Renaissance Myth. And The Renaissance Myth is a history essay about that goes over sort of the myth behind the idea of the Renaissance. This idea that the Renaissance was a time of great learning and rebirth and creativity. And he goes over the problems with this narrative, why it's false or misleading. And basically, to sum it up, what people take to be the Renaissance period, which is the period after the Black Death, but before the Great Enlightenment era, is that period of time did not have a lot of rational we did not see this flowering of rational thought. And in fact, during this period, we got to see a lot of anti-rational thought, a lot of anti-intellectualism, a lot of you saw the birth of these occult movements and superstitions, and you didn't see a lot of creativity in the arts either. At least compared to other periods of human history. And this is and when we get down to here, so he talks about how there were many different historical events that took place throughout Europe during this time. The Black Death, and the 100 Years' War, the English War of the Roses, all in the figures. And he says the figures of this century who have survived in the popular imagination from this era are Joan of Arc, Bluebeard, Dracula, and Torquemada, all of them associated with violent death in one form or another. Very so not a time for intellectual thought. And he talks about the sorts of intellectual mistakes that were very popular that inhibited rational thought during the era. And he says, at a more popular level of thought, some very odd developments took place in man's general conception of the world. The world became, as it were, covered up by an elaborate web of signs. In the secular field, there was an epidemic of heraldry. Of all sciences, it is perhaps genealogy which is the most intellectually degenerate, being a kind of perversion of the perfectly genuine scientific urge towards system and order, in the same way that I can't pronounce that word. Philately, I can't pronounce that word, is a perversion of the will to classification. Heraldry is, if anything, a further step away from genuine thought, in that while genealogy at least studies some actual facts, heraldry is a completely arbitrary system of signs parasitic on genealogy. Even the Wars of the Roses took their names from the symbols of the opposing sides. At the same time, literature contracted a malaise that seems in some way to be a symptom of the same basic disease, allegory. Huizinga's famous examination of this period in The Waning of the Middle Ages describes how everything came to be regarded as material from which to fashion signs of something else. The walnut signifies Christ. The sweet kernel is his divine nature. The green and pulpy outer peel is his humanity. The wooden shell between is the cross. Each of the words of the Ave signifies one of the perfections of the Virgin, and at the same time a precious stone, and is able to drive away a sin, or the animal which represents that sin. The 7 electors of the empire signify the virtues. Shoes mean care and diligence, stockings, perseverance, and the garter, resolution, etc. This habit of thought was particularly destructive of rational thinking, since, on the one hand, enormous imaginative effort was expanded in drawing ever more striking parallels between things, but on the other hand, it was essential to the exercise to pretend that these parallels were not just figments of the imagination, but were edifying just because the things compared really did mirror one another. It is not too far-fetched, I think, to compare this with Marxism. The tendency of Marxist thought, when faced with, say, a scientific result, is to relate the ideology of bourgeois science to the historical consciousness of the scientists and their community. Aside from the question of the truth of this, the overall effect is to divert attention from the original fact. The same is true of allegory. The facts about a thing and its actual relations with other things will be missed if the mind contemplating it is trained to look immediately for ingenious ways of seeing the thing as a sign of something else. The construction of the allegorical similarities replaced the search for causal connections. And he goes on and on from there. And he names this... if we go down here, he names this sign mania. He names this idea sign mania because of this. That's the title of this video, obviously, because I think what's happened in a lot of modern cases is that we're basically repeating this sort of Renaissance way of thinking, where we're more concerned with the signs and the relationship in these arbitrary relationships between signs than we are with the actual facts of things in themselves. And I'll give you some rather petty examples, and then moving on to more serious and damaging examples. All right, so I think first we have my friend Settler's Lament on Twitter. This is a shout out to his channel because he likes it when people shill him. So, hey there, Settler's Lament. I'm glad that you make videos. Please make more. We all like you. Anyway, so back a month ago, he talked about a Protestant he was arguing with, who he was talking about the history of the biblical canon, and said that the Catholics have used the same canon since the councils of Carthage and the Council of Rome. And he said, Carthage, you mean the people that were worshiping Moloch? And when I explained to him, no, it was a Christian council, he was really skeptical and said, I don't know. I find this Carthage thing really concerning. Of course, you know, what this fake pseudo-Protestant is, what this kind of pseudo-Protestant guy is glomming onto is the fact that this place, Carthage, they used to sacrifice children to Moloch there, and so therefore this Council of Carthage is suspect. Never mind the fact that, you know, Carthage was a place. Carthage was a place, and you know, it had Moloch worshippers at some point in time, I'm sure, but it had been a part of the Roman Empire for many years, many centuries at that point. I mean, and I don't think the Romans kept those practices around, or if they did, they weren't really a major part of the culture anymore. And furthermore, it was a Christian council that just so happened to take place in the city. The Christians who were in the council, they didn't worship Moloch at all. And so just because you were in the same city where Moloch worshippers once were, does not mean, obviously, that you are a Moloch worshiper or you're related to them. But, you know, this guy is glomming onto the fact that, oh, this is a Carthage council, meaning Carthage is Moloch worshippers. You know, he's looking for associations rather than looking at the nature of these things. He's looking at these associations. And then he continues, oh yeah, when I mentioned Judas in 2nd Maccabees, he was also really skeptical because his name was Judas. I explained to him that he had nothing to do with Judas Iscariot, and it was a very common name. And he was like, yeah, sure. I mean, again, the name Judas was describing two different individuals. Two different individuals had the same first name. Judas Iscariot, the betrayer, and Judas Maccabees, Judas Maccabee, who was a Jewish rebel against the sort of Greek forces that had taken over Jerusalem at the time. So yeah, it was, or rather, the Macedonian forces. I forget, the Alexander the Great was not Greek. He was a he was the Prince of Macedon. But anyway, moving aside, the Judas. So he's clinging on to the fact that both of these individuals were named Judas in order to establish some kind of connection with them, when really the connection is really, in reality, tenuous. All right, and you see this with occult. The occult is very much a part of this. You can look at The Secret This is a book that I once read called The Secret History of the World. I bought this off of a bookshelf once because I was interested in the title, in the blurb, and I didn't really know better. So I thought, oh, this looks like an interesting book because I'm into weird stuff like this. And reading the first few chapters, I came to realize that the book was nonsense. Like, they were telling me about how the 7 fallen angels in the book of Enoch were in actuality the 7 of the Greek Olympians, 7 of the most prominent Olympians in Greek mythology were the 7 fallen angels in the book of Enoch because of the number 7. Or how how there were like these 3 gods in Indo-Aryan cult religions. That was a sort of a prototype of the Trinity found in Christianity. Because they both had there were 3 gods involved. You see, so they would make these tenuous connections based on numbers and based on very loose analogies between people, and that was just it wasn't the only mistake this book made, but it was very much one of the major mistakes that I kept seeing over and over. And I was forced to put the book down, even though I liked this. I liked reading like this, because I was reading this ironically. I was reading this as fiction, but in sort of to help me understand where these occult people were coming from. But I just had to put the book down because I couldn't take it seriously at all. And honestly, I think a lot of the occult, what drives it is looking for these tenuous allegories, these tenuous connections based on like the numbers. So we move on to the political sphere, and we start to see that if we move beyond like the anecdote of that one Protestant and this kind of crazy occult people, we start to see this kind of sign mania play out, how it plays out in progressive politics. I bet you saw the title, and this is the Trump ran 88 ads with 14 words in the first sentence. Yes, this is an argument that Donald Trump ran these 88 ads with 14 words. That means that, therefore, Donald Trump is secretly Hitler or something. Donald Trump is secretly not neo-Nazi. He's dog whistling to the neo-Nazis. Because obviously these people, I don't know what's funnier, the fact that progressives are more obsessed about this than the actual alt-right, or the fact that they think that alt-righters are so desperate that they're looking for looking for dog whistles by counting the number of ads Donald Trump is running and the number of words they use in the first sentence of these ads. That is just cutting edge stuff. Cutting edge. Wow, that's so it's so deep, man. I'm being sarcastic. It's not deep. But you see Donald Trump ads depicting Joe Biden as a puppet of the radical left in the form of Bernie Sanders. And of course, he's comparing this to how Jews puppeteer people once upon a time in Nazi cartoons. Of course, the fact that somebody is a puppet is not in itself an anti-Semitic slur. Like the right progressives call right-wingers the puppets of like giant corporations or Israel all the time. So I don't see how you can make this connection without blaming your own side. But never mind, never mind. Donald Trump is Hitler because he used a political cartoon that had a puppet in it. And don't you know, Nazis also did that. So therefore, and finally, we have the eagle. An eagle holding an American flag versus an eagle holding a swastika. These two things look somewhat similar. Therefore, never mind how the eagle, the bald eagle, is one of our nation's symbols. No, we have to ignore that and skip to, well, he's ripping off the Nazi eagle logo. Because it's an eagle with a circle below it. Nobody thought you'd have to be a Nazi to think of the eagle with the circle, right? I mean, so yeah, and then it culminates in this, where you have Donald Trump return to the White House, described as his Mussolini moment, when he returns to the White House and he posed triumphantly for the cameras on a balcony, and he tore off his face mask, and he looked and it was supposed to look very masculine and brave. Oh, I'm sticking it to the libtards that are telling everybody to wear masks. I'm ripping it off, and I'm like, yeah, I'm the badass. And then you have an MSNBC person saying that, commentator Joy Reid saying that this is Donald Trump's Mussolini moment. And of course, Nick Fuentes plays into this for the memes, because of course he does. But moving aside, like, this is ridiculous, because posing from a balcony does not make you like Mussolini. Okay, having the political leader pose from a balcony does not make you a dictator. And if you ever come across somebody who says that this is that this is the case, then you're coming across someone who's gripped in this sign mania. And I think Distributus described these people the best when he says, I think you mean you don't like the aesthetics of fascism. And the socialist says, oh, I don't like anything about it. What policy ideals and where did you read about them? Which policy ideals and where did you read them? I'm curious. Silence. Silence is the grave. Because honestly, I think a lot of these people, they are so gripped by sign mania, and they're so obsessed with these kinds of superficial appearances that they don't really care about what lies deeper. And I think that is, let's see, I'm removing this. I think that is the key takeaway here, is that sign mania, what's wrong with it is that it's looking at the kind of superficial similarities in aesthetics and in outer appearances and in optics that different things portray, and in not looking into what the essence of the thing is. Because if we take Aristotle seriously, Aristotle and Plato and all of these classical thinkers, they would have all said that the object of human reason is the essence of a thing and what is good for it. The object of human reason is the essence of what it is, what makes a thing what it is, and the sort of causal connection, and part of that being the causal connections. What causes this thing to be what it is? What are its properties? Which properties are intrinsic to it? And, to a certain extent, modern science actually assumes this. When scientists go into a laboratory and do their experiments under very controlled conditions, they're not just observing what things are as they are in nature. They're trying to dig down to the root of what this thing is and what are its properties, rather than just looking out into nature and observing it that way, doing the field observations. Not that field observations are bad. They're not. They're very useful and necessary, I think. But, some modern science, to the extent that it relies on controlled experimentation rather than observing as the object as it is in the field, it agrees with Aristotle that intellectual inquiry is all about getting down to brass tacks, getting down to what the thing actually is, rather than what it isn't. And a large reason why the modern science is so successful is because it's able to do that in a more methodological way than previous the methodologies available in previous eras, rather. All right, so, and you can start to see where the sign mania goes wrong, because if you're paying attention to these kinds of outward positions and these vague cultural associations that are entirely arbitrary, really, then you'll end up just making the same mistakes as occultists and people like that, where you're just looking at the signs because you think that the signs have some deeper meaning to them beyond like what they're supposedly symbolizing. Because symbols and signs and things like that, those things only have meaning insofar as an intentional agent assigned them meaning. This is something that analytic philosophers talk about too. People like W.V.O. Quine. He made the point that there's nothing inherent to the physical properties of the word rabbit that would make it the proper word for the proper word to describe a four-legged lagomorph. We could have easily used the word gavagai for rabbit, and it would have still had the same effectiveness. It's only because of the cultural context that we associate the sign for the actual thing, and we only do that because there's an intentional agent that used the word rabbit to indicate the four-legged or lagomorph in front of us. And I think that's sort of lost when we just sort of look at just the pure sign in itself and not paying attention to the person who created the sign and what their intentions are in doing so. And I think I think we can close this sign by saying this talk by saying that sign mania actually cuts against rational thought, and it's contributing to a large amount of the irrationality that you see in modern society, and we should just stop that and get some help. Now that I've gotten that out off my chest, I'd like to hear what your comments are in the comment section. Do you have any? I'll be on here for a little bit longer, and if any of you three who are watching, thank you for watching, and maybe you could leave a comment in the live chat, and maybe we can talk a little bit. Let's. Hmm. I'm glad that I was able to get that off my chest. To be honest, I will be waiting. I'll be waiting for any kind of live chat for the next 5 minutes or so. But I'm honestly glad that I got that off my chest. I was planning on again. I was planning on making a full video on this, but then I realized that does it really need a full video when I could just explain the problem with it to you directly like this? I don't think so. I think honestly, I kind of like these sorts of takes that I make. They're very easy to plan out. I can see why Distributus prefers Distance to edited videos now. Dave, if you're watching, if you ever get around to watching this, I understand your pain. Anyways, I guess I'm losing audience members now. Well, I get we can turn in. I suppose. Well, it was nice talking to you. I hope that we'll have another quick talk sometime soon. And have a nice evening. Goodbye.